we identified there's three kind of key areas that we're going to touch upon regarding what prevents people from moving forward. A very important thing is feeling powerless. We've all felt powerless, right, in some shape or form, in certain circumstances. And of course it means many things, but mainly it means that we're just unable to express ourselves or create change because we just feel that we're not going to be heard. It's not just a question of we don't feel that we're going to be heard. I think there's a lot of imposing factors that create this in two very important areas. Our culture and of course stereotypes that arise from that. And that contributes quite greatly to this feeling of being powerless. Within culture of any background, there are already pre-developed norms that may either be evolving towards change or they may just not be touched upon at all. In the West, we've got a seemingly open attitude towards sexuality and freedom of expression, but it doesn't actually fully stop sexual harassment from occurring. This could be partly attributed to maybe over-sexualization of women and men that gives signals to potential perpetrators, that if body language is open and people dress in a non-conservative way, that it invites attention without consent. People feel unable to speak out about their experiences because they feel they will be blamed, and that does happen in a lot of areas. When I was growing up, I experienced that with many women around me who were sort of dressing in miniskirts and things, and they could not speak up. But this is not a very clear-cut area because in the UK, a young female volunteer for one of the major political parties out there, and actually she dresses quite conservatively, she was sexually harassed by a senior politician in British Parliament. And he did this several times with her, and of course it was a very well-documented case. But despite her going through a certain process that was outlined to her, it took more than 3 years actually to have a hearing due to a lot of gaps in the system and red tape. In the meantime, the perpetrator managed to get a promotion as there was no formal penalisation for his actions. In that instance, perhaps a recommendation could be that any organisation that promotes its members actually has independent background research from independent organisations to determine if it's a viable process for them to be promoted. In Asia, there are different cultural perceptions regarding sexuality in terms of what is acceptable and what's not, also in terms of what is acceptable for each gender. There's quite an unusual conflict there, though, because as on one hand, women are expected to be demure and subservient in relation to men, yet advertising there projects them as something completely different and sexualises them quite a lot. So there's a lot of conflict in the minds of people. And of course, boundary lines between what is acceptable and unacceptable behaviour gets very blurred. So you can feel powerless in a culture that's developed that kind of thing for a very long time. And as an Asian woman, I'm quite familiar with the background of this, which is why I'm sort of concentrating a little bit on that particular part of the world. Conditioning that says one must keep silent for the reputation of the family disables most people as well from speaking up when sexual harassment occurs. And women are generally told that their voices are less important than men, and if anything happens, it must be their fault and not men. However, interestingly enough, over the last few years, India has actually progressed quite a great deal, because there are two very big incidents that you may or may not be aware of that occurred there that create national outrage and gave the public the opportunity to overcome their feelings of powerlessness. And the rage was a collective feeling. And especially working women felt much more confident to get up there and speak. The first was, of course, the tragic rape case of a young girl called Jyoti, whose only fault was to travel in the evening with a non-related male. And as a result of that situation, laws regarding the protection of women started to happen, and of course, escalated by the Me Too campaign, caused a lot of new laws to be formed, which stated that employees of companies must sign a compulsory document that outlines protocols in behaviour towards women, which was actually quite a major move. However, having said that, although it's a great movement forward, it has sadly been abused a bit, because a lot of men have been unfortunately accused of sexual harassment when that hasn't been the case. And that's usually come from sort of women who felt hurt by something or who've wanted to have quite a lot of promotion, and they've used that law to gain benefit for themselves. And also there's been a kind of a witch hunt towards men, which hopefully that will soon go, because a lot of men have felt very uncomfortable to behave naturally with women. You know, they don't know whether they should reach out an arm, if they touch them, is that sexual harassment? If they make a nice compliment, is that considered sexual harassment? So they've got to be much more to protect people, both men and women, and also very clear-cut guidelines in terms of what is really sexual harassment. It's not just unwanted behaviour. You know, it could be something else in disguise, or something else might not be that, and we've got to identify exactly what it is. And within Asia itself, or let's say especially India, I think it's very important to educate